From the eye of Noah, between the highway wherever visible and invisible streets meet, I resolved to lead little Harry on a bike ride to the native burial mounds. The route, I imagined, made me nervous. Amidst lockdown, I pushed my bike up the exhausting campus hill once and never again. The kid was malnourished and bent, and I wasn't confident he could ride a bike up the winding road to the top of the hill where stands the university's observatory dome and a native burial mound. I decided to continue my plan for its holistic appeal. I would carry Harry outside into the sunlight, give him exercise, teach him a story, and instill him with a sense of gratitude toward natives. In the back of my mind, I hoped the burial mounds would cause him to reflect on the possibility of death, on the possibility of his father's death. After I purchased a kid bike, Harry shyly confessed how he could not ride a bike. He white-knuckled the handlebars and tried to make the bike balance without motion. But once I got him outside of his head, he learned quickly, and we rode off after dinner. I feared I would not remember the way without my phone, but I led Harry from park to park, divining with surprising ease the correct directions to turn our rides. First, we rode to the burial mound in Resurrection Cemetery, not far from Chris Farley's tomb, where Eve once planted her palms to absorb his power. Next, we rode to the mound at Picnic Point, where I grew fearful of the woods and water encircling us. Finally, we rode to the burial mound on Observatory Hill. Harry pedaled up the hill too, to my relief, surprise, pride, and joy, to a strange, fresh mix of paternal emotions. I called for us to break at the scenic overlook of Lake Mendota, and he was almost panting as we pushed our bikes by their handlebars. I handed him my water bottle, and he gulped. Harry, stop. He sounded dislodged something in me. Why? Because if you chug the water, you'll grow nauseous. Sip the water. I have got to take a break from drinking, I thought. I felt awfully guilty for training Harry to effectively pound beers. Though I myself was deeply thirsty, I thought to let him drink as much water as he needed. Then, I remembered I hadn't learned the sip technique from binge drinking. I had been taught to sip my water in ROTC training my freshman year of college. Strange. For all of its influence on me, I hadn't recalled my semester in ROTC since I moved to Madison. When last I rode to the top of Observatory Hill, there stood a dark behemoth of rock, as tall as two long men and as wide in a circle as 10. Genevieve and I picnicked in the rock's long shade the summer we moved to Madison. She had measured the burial mound by walking the outline and counting her footsteps. She traced the shape of the burial mound in her notebook using a yellow pencil and showed me the shape. According to a plaque on the rock, the university had dedicated the rock to the memory of a local geologist. The rock was an anomaly, carried to Madison by a glacier, so the rock was significantly older than the rest of Madison's geology. I remember the rock was at least 1 billion years old. When Harry and I locked our bikes, I realized the beautiful rock had vanished in a thin air. Grass trembled where the rock once stood. Without internet access, I couldn't find out why or how the rock had vanished. The rock's disappearance frightened me. Grass overgrew the burial mound, naturally, and the sun continued to fall. Notice anything about the burial mounds? I asked. They're really cool, said Harry. Notice anything about their shape? No. Why don't you trace the edge of the mound with your footsteps? Be very careful not to walk over the burial mound itself. Harry traced his footsteps along the burial mound, which rose from the earth in the shape of a bird in flight. I told him the history of our land, the indigenous people who were exiled, murdered by our military and almost forgotten. His neck bent towards the grass. He watched his own footsteps as he passively nodded along to my story. I figured he had heard my story a million times already in Arizona, in fluorescent classrooms, in the media, online, everywhere. I recalled information about the Ojibwe I had been taught in elementary school. I remembered the models of their villages in our tiny hands, glued and painted. I encouraged Harry to uplift the Native American community in spirit. I encouraged him, whenever he had a choice, to respect the earth. I didn't know a single living native. The media-fed all-natural aesthetic was my only idea of native ways. I suppose I could have reformed this misrepresentation with better research, but I never remembered to do this, and now I could not access the internet. I didn't want to disrespect natives. I revered natives. I was too busy to go to the library. I was worried my stereotypical images of native culture might instill subtle racism into little Harry. I remembered when I was a boy inside Concord Elementary School, in the classroom of Miss Masterson. We sat cross-legged on the polyester carpet before projections of educational films. We viewed stories of the native tribes of the tri-state area, such as the Ojibwe. The native children in the film played their buffalo hunting game across the prairie, running through tall-as-me grass, as though the grass were open air. Shh. It looked fun, like a lifetime of recess. The natives felt so calm and healthy, not obese and supersized, but so in touch with nature over the soundtrack of the wood flute. I wished I were a native boy in the good old days. No tests, lots of pets, tall as me grass, which doesn't need mowing. I fantasized following the buffalo as they roamed the plains beneath the star field. I wondered at the true nature of the stars because of the Southwestern Diner and Percy Jackson. I grew sad knowing their world had vanished forever. I knew the concrete suffocated the old paths. I knew their way of life had vanished forever because of a horrifying black and white photograph inside my history textbook of a pile of buffalo skulls piled as tall as my own house. We watched the films, the recreations of the beautiful, rare-skinned people gliding over the lakes in birch canoes, collapsing their teepees for nomadic movement, flattening the prairie grass with their moccasins. I pined for their recreation. It must be cliché to recall. I'm sure many young boys and girls in America grasp this fantasy. My legs felt twisted like a pretzel as the projector washed over the darkened classroom, and I felt the severest melancholy. I dreaded our looming invasion. But the characters in the film were clueless, innocent. The film even indulged my anemia at the final act when the storyteller's voiceover told how the film's my-age protagonist would be of the last generation to live and die free of the encroachment of European settlers. The film ended. Miss Masterson turned on the new eco-friendlier lights. I gazed out the window at the yard grass of our recess field. Why did the wave build the railroad west? Why did the military crush the natives for the American people to replace them? We are no better than they were, I've realized, but we're too different to be their equal, I logically reasoned. Do you ever wish you were an Indian? I asked Harry. Harry didn't say anything back, but shot me a look like I was stupid or crazy in the dramatic fashion of a child who learned the facial contortion from a video. I realized each and every one of us does so much wrong to the natural order and to each other. In thought and in voice and in action, we deal incalculable blows upon the natural order every day. Every step on the pedal felt like an affront to the world. Every word I spoke, a plastic bottle trashed. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't choose where and how and when. Where does this guilt end? Who bears the blame for the negligence, the weakness, the evil, the climate? I felt sorry. I felt sorry for Harry's sake. His father, Ben, missing. I apologized to Ben. I asked him to forgive me for all the wrongs I am positive I did him without even realizing it. I asked him to forgive what wrongs people had done to him, and without realizing it, I asked him to forgive what wrongs Ben had done himself without even realizing it. Where do these wrongs begin and end? Who is responsible for all that is wrong in this world? Harry knocked me from my contemplation with a question. How did the first natives in Wisconsin survive the winter? Well, they built teepees and wove furs to keep them warm. How did they learn to build teepees and weave furs in winter? If they couldn't survive winter without teepees and furs, Harry asked. I stared at the waters of Lake Mendota growing red beneath the sunset, and I said, well, they came from Canada. It's even colder in Canada. Oh. The young man's curiosity quelled at this depth. I thought in circles. Perhaps I facelessly pondered. The wave was inevitable. In with the new, out with the old. Not because of divine destiny or superiority, simply because physical networks are bound to grow. The only thing that will last, so shall the forces preserve themselves in union. So shall the terms and conditions change. So shall the updates turn compulsory. So shall the battle for central space continue at the expense of pawns. So shall limbs be hacked. So shall the many outnumber the whole. So shall their demands and tasks multiply. So shall bits deemed worthy be saved, or else permanently lost to history. Absolved, I stared across the red lake, and I saw short streaks of light in every direction. Bursts of light flashing the eternal language across my vision. The lights disappeared. The moment my conscience questioned their appearance, I stumbled backwards and tripped into the grass, staring in terror at Harry's curved spine and his pale neck bent toward the dirt. Harry, I said, remembering the words of my good old friend from high school. We stole this land to keep it from each other. Harry chuckled and paid my words little mind as he traced his footsteps in circles over the edge of the burial mound. I tugged at the grass without tearing it. Who to trust in the search for Ben? Maxwell came from the future. I knew nothing of him. Who to trust? I decided to trust Maxwell over Jevon. Maxwell claimed to be a conservativist, a conservationist. Truth be told, I pitied Maxwell and distrusted Jevon, solely because of the long story Maxwell told me in the parking lot, and Jevon's status as the billionaire leading that major American computer software corporation. I remembered Maxwell and Eve's words and realized it was truly up for grabs whether telepathic, endless communication would unify or obliterate humanity's soul. The unity of the Neuralink would depend on the lag between feeling and expression, and what users would be compelled to share. It's all or nothing. Either we share all of ourselves or we continue to compete. In any case, the unity of the Neuralink felt like beating a video game with a cheat code. An empty victory. Let me put it this way. There's no word for how afraid I am of the Neuralink. The speed would be far too much, the communication too unbounded, and here's why. The big technology firms play their cards awfully close to their chest for how greatly their decisions alter the cultural ecosystem. They're as blameless for this concealment as you are when you arrange the right outfit for a date. In a game of high-stakes poker, you need to play your cards close to your chest or you lose all advantages. You would never think out loud about your strategy in the middle of a chess game. Of course, chess is a game dependent on the domination of opponents. If chess were to lose the goal of checkmating the king, the pieces were never captured, then chess would just be a strange dance of interlaced piece moves until the 50-move draw rule took effect, at which point chess might as well drop the game clock, perform the two players' moves simultaneously in an attempt to balance their intuitions, complete the game by carving the 8x8 checkerboard into a special irregular shape based on the piece's motion over the course of the game, and preserve the unique board as a memory of the game. This is all a ridiculous dream, of course. The moment the first pawn moves to control the center, the game is on. Harry, what did I tell you about stepping on the mound? My ferocity caused me to forget to ask him if his footsteps revealed the shape of a bird. Whatever. I would rather go inside the observatory. I let him ask for a tour while I watched the rest of the sunset. In hindsight, letting him walk away alone was irresponsible. The city was not as safe as it has been before the pandemic, and we all felt we had to be on our guard. Harry returned to me once the sky grew dark. Luckily, we shined lights from our bikes, and the road followed to our apartment. Tours were suspended to prevent the spread of a new COVID-19 variant. I hadn't heard the news because of my screen blindness.